Hello, my name is Mark Sinakuri, and now I'm going to tell about my experience working as a CBS page, especially at one specific show, The Price is Right, at Television City in Hollywood in 2007. I had moved to Los Angeles on September 2nd, 2005 to attend UCLA's professional screenwriting program, and in 2006, in the new year, when I had gotten back to campus, I said to myself, I haven't seen The Price is Right yet. I want to start going to see that show. I was living in Westwood, and it was about maybe 10, 15 minutes away to get to Hollywood. At that time of night, around 11:30, 12 in the morning, there was no traffic at all. So it just took me about 10 to 15 minutes to get there from that area where I was living. So I go to the show. I went 6 times in early 2006. I went February, March, and I believe maybe earliest April of 2006. And each time I went to the show, when I was interviewed by the contestant coordinator, Stan Blitz, he'd always smile. Mark, how you doing, Mark? And he'd remember me. The first time I went to the show, knowing me, I always like to sing and create things. And I had a little jingle I was creating. I'm going to create a little jingle. I was like, The Price is Right. It's a show with might. It's been on for 34 years. It's out of sight. The unsinkable Price is Right. And I kept singing that all day, all day, all day while I was at the studio before my interview. And then when I was like, he's like, Mark, where you from, Mark? I'm like, oh, I'm from Massachusetts originally. I'm living here in Los Angeles now, going to UCLA screenwriting program. I also have a song to sing about The Price is Right. So I was starting to sing it, and I just froze up. And Stan starts laughing, and then his assistant starts smiling. And then he's like, well, you can sing it to Bob when you're in the studio. I'm like, okay. And then each time I go to the show, we interview in groups of like maybe, I think it was about 15 to 20 the time, because there were about 300 people in line. And while I was at the show, he remembered me every time I go back. Mark, great to see you again, Mark. I didn't sing no song when I went back, every time after that. But I was like, how you doing, Stan? Great, great. And he'd always smile, and his assistant would always be writing notes down. And there would always be someone from my group called that I interviewed in with the first 4 days that I was there, that I went to see the show. The last 2 days, nobody in my group got called. Nobody I even knew in line got called. So it's always a gamble. You don't know who's going to get called. It's up to Stan the man. Well, it was. He's not working there anymore. He had retired a few seasons ago. So I finished UCLA, and I went home that summer, and then I came back that fall, and I was applying everywhere. I was applying here, there, and even regular jobs, and nobody was hiring. Nobody. I was going door to door in Santa Monica. I was applying through Craigslist. Nobody was hiring. Nothing was going on. I knew nothing about extra work at the time. I didn't even know anything about doing that. And if I had known, I would have done extra work at that time. But I didn't. I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about Audiences Unlimited, which I worked years later. Or paging at shows like on-camera audiences. I didn't even know anything about applying to those. So then my friend from Merrimack was working at the show, and he was working as a CBS page, because Roger Dopkowitz got him on the show when he was when he was an contestant in 2005. He met Roger at the show. Roger, I want a job. Roger, I want a job. And he got him a job when he moved to LA. So he goes, apply to CBS. I'm like, I did apply. He goes, apply again. So I applied again, and I called Human Resources. I said, I sent my resume, and I want to know my status. And they said, okay, well, okay, Mark, there you are right there. Okay. Yeah, do you want to come in for an interview? I'm like, definitely. Yeah, of course. So I went in for the interview. I met with, who did I meet? Well, I met I think I met HR first, then someone in HR. Then I met with Karen Winchell, the boss, and I was dressed up in a suit, and she took note of that, and she's like, "Mark, you're dressed up in a suit. That's great." I was like, "Thank you." And she's like, "That shows a lot of respect for CBS and the jobs you want to work." And I remembered when I was in seventh grade, my teacher, Mrs. Oteri, told us when you go on an interview, when I was at Holy Trinity School in Lawrence, when you go on an interview, you go with a suit, no matter what kind of a job it is. Even even a little job in a store, you go in a suit, dress nice. And Karen told me sometimes people who come from these positions, they don't dress up. They just go in regular clothing. And I don't hire them. And I told her, I was a shift manager at McDonald's. I took as many classes as I could in entertainment. I was going to UCLA. I finished that with the screenwriting program. And I had a lot of energy. And I love television. I was telling her all the shows I used to like to watch. And I love watching The Price is Right. And she said, that's the show. That's the most important one that we work here on a lot. Well, not anymore in 2023 because CBS has been sold in Hollywood. So she said, we'll stay in touch. It was November at the time. She goes, we'll keep in touch. I'm like, okay. So I went home for Christmas, and then she called me, and she said, Mark, how about starting in the new year? I said, of course. I can't wait. So I got the job there, and I started working on all different shows in the lot. Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, and then Ticket Office, CBS Ticket Office, CBS Ticket Booth on Fairfax, which stopped after a few years after Drew Carey took over because of OCA. On-camera audiences did everything after that. And then The Price is Right. And I said to myself, well, after I saw the show 6 times, I made Price is Right with lyrics, the theme song. The Price is Right, the show with mine. It's been on forever and ever and ever. It's out of sight. Yes, that is right. The unsinkable Price is Right. Come on to now, win, 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 win. So, and if I had sung that to Stan, I would have remembered all the lyrics. And I had sung it months earlier on YouTube. Excuse me. So, I went to the show, and my friend was doing his thing with the audience, and he goes, do your song, they'll love it. So I did my song, and every time I do the song, there'd be at least a few people in the audience. We've seen it on YouTube. That's when YouTube came out. I got YouTube in 2006, like around January, February. And I made the song up, I think it was late April, early May, after I had gone to this show 6 times. So, and then I have a stalker group that broke into my computer and saw my live journal, so I don't really want to get into that. I want to get into the good things that happened at the show. Not the times my ex-best friend from Merrimack was egocentric, or any of those times he did those mean things to me, which I've talked about in other blogs on here on YouTube, but I want to talk about the good points. So I was working the show, and little by little, I would add more things to my act. I did the Price is Right lyrics. I would change lyrics to songs and make them Price is Right inspired. And the audience members, they were all cheering and clapping and Mark, 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 yeah. And I do a little talk with the audience. Hey guys, who's ready to win a car? Who's ready to play Plinko? Who's ready to see Bob Barker? And they'd be cheering and cheering and cheering. And I met a lot of nice audience members at the show. A few that stick out. One audience member that really stuck out was James Mosier. He and his wife came to the show. It was early spring of 2007. And they were just really nice people. Really nice people. They didn't really know what to do with the show. They're like, what do we do? Where do we go? I was around them a lot that day. And I was talking to them about, what I was doing in LA. And they were talking to me about they're from, I think it was Ohio area. And I was outside that day, all day. And then when he comes out, he goes, Mark, I got called. I get to play dice game. I won a car with Bob. So He was one audience member I really remembered at the show. Another audience member I remember was a woman named Penny. I don't remember her last name. Excuse me. But I remember when she went into the show, I didn't go inside. She picked the lint off of Bob Barker's suit. She really wanted to get on the show. Her and her friend went, and she got called down. So when she came out, she gave me a hug. Wonderful, I got called. And then I remembered a woman named Lois Parker. She was also one of the best contestants I met at the show. Best contestants. Best audience members. She was dancing in line and was singing with me, and she had so much energy. And she got called down, too. Another good contestant. She got called down. I was inside the studio when that happened. and then I remember I met a woman at the show named Bessie. I forget, I don't know her last name. Maybe it was Richards. I don't know. But I remember she played Money Game, and she won a car with Bob. And I remember telling her at that sideline, Bessie, you're going to go on the show. You're going to win a car. She's like, yeah. And after the show, she goes, child, your singing was so inspirational. And guess what? I won a car. So I remembered her. And then those are some of the contestants I remembered at the show while I was with the audience doing my thing. And then in the spring, at some point, my other boss, Irie Savasta, tells me, Mark, I have a job for you. I'm like, you do? She goes, yeah. A few of the pages, we're going to get 4 of you guys together, and you're going to be practice contestants with Mario Lopez. He's going to be doing his test show in a few days. Oh, well, great. I can't wait to do that. Yeah. So it was, I think, on a Saturday we did that. We all went in on a Saturday, and we got to meet Mario Lopez, and we got to play contestants on the bidders row. Of course, I was the first up, because I had gotten the closest to the actual retail price on, I think it was a big grandfather clock or something. I get up on stage, I start playing clock game with him, and he's like, Mark, what's the price of this exercise machine? I'm like, $9.99. He's like, oh my God, you're a Price is Right genius. And I remember him holding me, like, putting his hand around me. He was very, very thin and bony. I can't say muscular. He was very thin. Like, when he put his hand around me, I was, like, feeling bones. It wasn't muscles, it was bones. He was very small, like small frames. And at the time, I was small frame, too. I was only 75 pounds back then. After I had lost from 300 to 150 2 years before, and put just a little bit back on. So I was there doing my thing, doing my characters. I was doing characters after the first time I was on stage with him. And the producer, Roger Dokowitz, and Fingers Greco, and Stan Blitz, they're all there. And Rich Fields, like he's calling us down each time. And they're laughing, they're smiling. Fingers is like, Mark, you sound like that guy who was on American Idol who sang Fever. Some audience contestant. I don't know how long he was at the show for. But I don't know who she was talking about. So when she goes, Mark, tone it down. You're really good, but just tone it down a little. It's okay. It's just rehearsals. And I got to meet Roger. I got to talk to all of them. Roger Dokowitz, Fingers Greco, Rich Fields, and Stan Blitz. And Stan was like, Mark, didn't I call you down? You might have been called down, weren't you? And I told him, no. I was like, I went to the show 6 times. You called people in the first 4 groups I was interviewed with the first 4 days. But I was on stage with one of them when they won the showcase, Amy Sue. And he's like, wow, even if I didn't call you down, you work here now. That's even better. This is the place to be. I told him, this is where I want to be. I love it, And as the weeks went on, excuse me, as the weeks went on, the CBS pages, a lot of them didn't like working the show. A lot of them hated the audience. A lot of them were quitting. A lot of them would get jobs in a week, 2-3 weeks' time, and they'd up and quit. And I said, why do you guys want to leave for other jobs? Stay here. This is a great place to be. This is the best show. And I wanted to work Bob Barker's last episode. I'm like, I would love to work that. I would love to work that. I told Irie, my boss, who was doing the schedules, if I get to work any episode that last week, I don't want to work his Monday shows. I'm always working the 2 double Monday shows only. I would rather work his Wednesday, his last show. She goes, okay, I'll see what I can do. And all the pages are like, if we get scheduled, we'll switch with you. We don't like the publicity. We don't like the audience. We don't like the show. You do it. I'm like, okay. So, fortunately, I was one of the inside pages that day. Irie put me on the show. So, I remember being very early that day in line. I was very early because I remember my tires were flat. I must have gotten glass on them or something a couple of weeks before. And I'm like, if my tires are low, I'd rather get them fixed in the morning and go, to the show later on when I have to be there for 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. So I get there like at 7:30 in the morning, go to the Grove, get myself a blueberry pomegranate smoothie at the Coffee Bean as usual, and then meet the audience in line. And I met Philip Barrett like 5 days before when I was working the ticket booth on Fairfax. And he's like, is this where it stands? I'm like, yes, yes. You'll be great. You have a lot of energy. They're always picking the first people in line now, especially for the $1 Million Special and the Bob's 50th. And you'll definitely be one of them called down, but be energetic. Be energetic, and I know you'll get called down. So I can give you for advice. I don't choose them, but I know the ones who get called down are always the ones who are energetic. So I got to do my thing with the audience again for the last time, and I got them a cheer. There was news teams that were out there. They were just waiting by the stage to go in, not saying anything, and I'm like, Bob, 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 and they were all cheering with me. And then Roger Dobkowitz came out in line to greet the audience, and he told me, Mark, I love your energy out there. You were always getting them a cheer for Bob. And that's something I'll always remember from working his last episode, always. And I said to myself, I'd love to be a head page inside. I'd love to ask Roger at some point, do we need production assistance? But unfortunately, I had left CBS after Bob's last episode, and Roger was let go a year later, and the PAs that he hired in 2007 and 8 were let go with him. So in a way, it was a blessing. I had left, and I wasn't the PA there, because I probably would have been let go as well. Even though how devoted I was to the show, I would have been out in line every morning, greeting that audience as I got to the job before work. That's how I would have been every day. So I was at the show, it was Bob's last episode, and then we went inside the studio, and we were all dancing. All the pages and the audience were dancing out in line inside the studio before Rich Fields did his warm-up. And there were press taking video and pictures everywhere of us, all of us, pages, and the audience dancing together. And I cannot find anything online except one little footage of it that I found in 2019. I can't find any more. I can't find the press photos they took. We were holding the air date sign, jumping on the stage, and showing it to the audience. I can't find that anywhere. And then Bob came out, and I'm cheering, Bob, 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 Bob. And all the audience is there. You could see when they show the big screen, flat screen TV, as they show the audience, you can see some of the guys in the front row. The guy in the front row is going, Bob, 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 Bob. And then when Bob came out, there was confetti everywhere. And then Philip Barrett got called down, of course. He was the third contestant called down. And then Glenn Walker Harris Jr., who was Sly on General Hospital, wanted me to switch with him. I was guarding Rich Fields' side of the stage, on the left side of the screen of the TV. And then he was in the back on the other side, opposite. And he goes, Mark, I want to get a picture with Bob. Let's switch. I'm like, you don't really do that much thing with the audience. Oh, yeah, I'll be fine. So, fortunately, we switched. But when we switched, Dean Lindstrom got called down, and he was right next to me. So I got screen time, and I could say, wow, there I am at Bob's last episode. Even if you couldn't see me when Shayla Sanders got called down, that quick second, there I am right there, clapping on the white platform when he got called down. And then I held onto the railing when he took a fall. And then Melva Cranston got called down. You could see me for a split second as well by the green curtain in the back. And then I went back to the front toward the end of the show, and I was giving Bob Barker gifts from the audience. And I remember going up on stage, up the stairs, waiting there as he was talking to the audience, and he turns to me, and I remember he smelled of Old Spice. He was wearing Old Spice all the time. And every time I gave him a gift, he'd say in a comedic fashion, "Now what the heck is this? Now what the hell is this? What's this?" And the audience would get a laugh from that. And I said, "Oh, Bob, this is a stuffed animal." Or, "Oh, Bob, this is a shirt or a hat someone has for you." "Oh, okay, great." And then Bob said his goodbyes, and he left. And I remember comforting one of the audience members, Joshua. He was a contestant earlier on in the season, and him and his friend Willie, who was also a contestant, I think of one of the Christmas Day or Christmas Eve shows. They both visited the show a lot. I think they were there for test shows, and they were there for Bob's last show. And Josh was crying, and he even has two photos that the press took that were online at the time. I don't know if they're still around, but they were online back then. And I was comforting him. I was like, "Josh, it's okay. Bob's okay. He's doing good. He'll be fine. Maybe he'll even make visits to the show. Who knows?" And then Rich Fields calls me up on stage to drive a door prize. And one of the models comes up to me, and I pick the name out of a hat or a bag or whatever. And then Rich goes, "Oh, me and Mark are going drinking later." And they all had a laugh. The audience laughed. And that's my memory of working Bob's last episode of The Price is Right. And going back to the page office to sign up for the day, my then friend from Merrimack, who's not my friend anymore, he said, "Can you believe it? Us meeting back in 2001, September, at Merrimack College MCTV 10, and now here it is, 6 years later. We had dreams of moving to LA. We always talked about moving to LA, and here we are, working Bob's. We worked Bob Barker's last episode of The Price is Right together." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Can you believe that? We followed our dreams, and we're still here." So those are some of the memories I remember working at CBS and The Price is Right. I know I left a lot out, but those are some of the key points that I remember, and I'll always remember for the rest of my life.